Hey, Alec Miller here, founder of Royals and Rogues, and today I talked to Chris Do. Now, Chris needs no introduction, and so I'm not going to give you one. But I will let you know that in today's video, we're going to be talking about the man behind Chris Do and who he really is, and some of his life philosophies, and some of the questions I always wanted answered about Chris that I never really saw gotten to on other podcasts because people were trying to get advice about their careers or about growing their business. And here we get into a little bit more about what makes Chris tick. Why does he feel the need to teach a billion people? And we get into some history of him growing up and escaping communist Vietnam and his journey to giving back to the community and the country that's helped him out so much, and now the world. I think it's a really good look into what makes Chris Do, and how maybe you can overcome some of the things that are holding you back in your own creative career. Thank you so much for listening, and here's my discussion with Chris Do. You've been incredibly generous with your time and being willing to just kind of meet with anybody. And you've hit some really cool milestones recently of 1 million subscribers on YouTube. You're one of the fastest growing clubhouses there is. And yet you still somehow find time to meet with the little guys like me. And I just wanted to first off say thank you, and that I really, really appreciate you coming down and spending some of your valuable time with me. So
it's my pleasure, Alec.
Yeah. I also just wanted to ask how are you doing? Like I know it's been kind of crazy, and you've been constantly giving advice and doing 30 plus hours of Clubhouse a week. But like, how are you doing? How's life?
Life is pretty good. I think I'm in a pretty privileged place, so I'm not in a spot where I need to complain about anything. My family is good, business is good, and no one I know close has been sick yet. So we're just adjusting to this year-long chilling at home kind of thing, and trying to be creative at breaking that monotony has been the challenge. But other than that, it's been really great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I expect to see a lot of Netflix breakdowns after this coming out.
Oh, it's coming.
But yeah, one of the things that I really loved that we did last year, just before all this insanity happened, was the Future Pro meetup. And I know a lot of people have been issuing it. I think it was just the anniversary of it a few days ago.
Yeah.
And you kind of have some really big visions for the future. So I also kind of wanted to ask you, ignoring everything that everyone knows is going on, what's kind of the plan? You've mentioned getting a studio where people can come in and do work. Like, what are you excited about the future?
I don't know yet about the big plan, and I'm an adjust as you kind of go, because there are a lot of things that are up in the air. We just don't know when things are going to change again. And so I want to be light on my feet. Right now, I have this really big space. It's 13,000 square feet. And I really don't need that amount of space. And it would be in my best business interest to rent it out. But nobody needs office space right now because nobody's has a centralized office. So we want to get creative about what we're doing with the studio in the meantime, because I also don't want to hold my breath and wait for things and not do anything. So we're working on this really great, I think it's like this gigantic broadcast virtual studio where we can do Zoom calls in ways that few other people can do it, with several 4K screens, multiple cameras, and we need to upgrade our cameras to 4K, and then just have that ready for anyone that we want to invite into the studio to make content with us. These could be guests, these could be speakers and authors. I don't know yet, but as you can see in the last couple of videos that we've released on YouTube, it's starting to come along nicely. The backdrop looks really good. The lighting's on point. We're still struggling with some technical issues, but we also bought a gigantic 4-foot by 8-foot softbox that it's going to be dropped in the ceiling. And I think that's just going to take the lighting game to the next level. So I'm just geeking out on film stuff with you right now.
No, that's awesome. I love all that. I've been a part of a couple of those, I think. The How to Create Anything one was similar to that. And I think there's another one, the Ikigai call as well, was very similar to that. And it's been really cool seeing you kind of have this ability to merge all the different things you're doing. And anytime you have a very squirrel mentality like I do, and many creatives, where it's like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that. But then somehow you're able to kind of all make them all work for you. Is there a process you use to do that? Or is that just kind of the way you naturally are? It's like, if I want to do this thing, I have to figure out a way that it builds on something else I'm already doing.
Yeah, I think it's natural for a creative person to have that attention deficit what is that called? ADHD, hyperactive disorder, where everything looks really awesome. Like, oh my God, that's cool, that's cool. And then you get pulled in 1,000 different directions. The key is to be able to satiate that hunger that you have to do lots of different things, but to channel them into something that's going to build. So it's like, I look at it like I've built the foundation to something. Like if we're going to do a metaphor of a house. So adding a skylight to the house adds interest, but it doesn't distract me and it doesn't take away value from that house. Like if I want to do landscaping, get some curb appeal, I'm going to do that. And that again contributes to the value of the house. So exploring digital tools, collaboration tools, cameras and lenses and lighting, those all seem like different interests, but they actually are building together to make something much bigger.
Yeah, it's. I'm still a little baffled by it. I haven't been able to do it quite as well as you have with all my different hobbies, and it's some of them are harder to stack than others. But one of the things I think is really interesting is like you're saying, like you have something that's a light, and it's like, well, this might not be the core of what I'm doing, but it adds interest and it doesn't take away from anything, so that's okay. What is something that you really wanted to add or you're really excited about that didn't quite work out and you had to let go of in this process, whether that's a format of video or a type of show or something else? There's a few that come to my mind, but I'm not you, so I don't really know if they're true or not.
Oh, you can bring them up because I'm not really thinking about those. My mind generally focuses on what's worked. And if it didn't work, I just quickly iterate on that and try and figure out how to make it work. So I'm sure they're there. They're just around my periphery, and I don't focus on the mistakes so much. I just focus on the lessons learned.
Yeah, because I've been watching the future and part of the kind of community, as it were, for a really long time. And you've evolved a lot throughout it. Like earlier on, you're doing stuff much more similar to this, where it was kind of podcasts, and then it was like live podcasts, and then a lot of kind of how-to stuff, tutorial sort of things, as well as having talented guests on, and some of those were like watching them do something live. So it's been really interesting watching kind of you experiment around this whole realm. But one of my favorite things that you've ever done was the Building a Brand series, and I think a lot of artists found a lot of value in that. Even though it wasn't able to turn into like a Netflix series or something that you might have hoped. So that's one that sticks out to me as something that was tried. I found a lot of value in, and I would have had a really hard time letting go of that. And I think as artists, once we find something we really love, even if it's not working, we have a really hard time moving on from it. So was that a similar feeling for you, or is that not your baby and was someone else's baby? How did that all work out?
Yeah, that one's complicated. I think it's one of the most beloved things that we've done as a series, and to everyone that worked on it, they deserve all the credit in the world. I don't consider that a failure. I think we overinvested in something without realizing what the outcome was going to be. And I think that's where Ben and Matthew started on something. Like, we had this idea. I'm like, yeah, we should be doing this. And then it just became like it snowballed, and it just started to consume all the resources in the company for months working on something. And if you don't have like a Mr. Beast kind of result on each one of these videos, then you think, did we overinvest? And I'm a big believer in the minimum viable product idea, your MVP. So like, you have an idea of a sequence, do that, and then adjust as you go. And something like that, where you're putting all of your eggs in a basket, and if it doesn't work out, you're so committed to seeing it through, there's no room for adjustment. And I don't think it's a failure. Actually, I think it's quite the opposite. It was a really big success for what it was, not relative to what we invested in it. That was the lesson learned there.
Yeah, I guess, what are some of the metrics, I guess, for you for success? Because I know there's kind of this push and pull for a lot of artists right now, and I feel it a lot because I really like to spend a long time on things, crafting them, but you don't really get the results you want. And I just had a guy on, Adam Spizak, who spends months on a piece of artwork, and he releases it, and it turns out really well. Like, sometimes this works. You can find an audience that appreciates the time and effort put in, and that's what's working for him, versus other people, are releasing dailies. You have he's kind of the inverse of a Beeple, let's say. And both are valid, both have their own reasons for existing. But is there a criteria that you use that you find is, here's what I'm looking for, and if I get these results, then I know, that this is something worth pursuing? And what are those kind of metrics for you?
Yeah, so it's very clear for our team, our content team. Views, watch time, subscribers, those are the metrics that matter to us. So if you have a lot of views but low watch time, that's not good. If you have a long watch time but not a lot of views, that's not good either. And if you get both lots of views and long watch time, but you don't actually earn new subs, you're not growing your audience. And that's critical for us as well. And so we're looking at those numbers. Now, we know that if a video can get into the 100,000 plus views, it's going to live on a long life. It's like you created your child, they're going to go out in the world and they're going to live productive lives. And that's really cool for us. When it can't break the 20 or 30,000 view orbit, it stays in that place forever. And sometimes it's a function of the thumbnail, the title, the way we deliver the content. It's not always an indictment on that the content itself was not good. And that's where we kind of have to sit back and say, what did we learn from this and how can we grow? Now, as a point of comparison, how we decide what we do is this. Like I'm a big believer in this. Like I want to make small bets, many small bets. I don't want to make one big gamble. And so when you go into the ultimate refinement thing where this is going to be the best thing I've ever made, and it's going to take me 2 to 3 months, and it's going to consume a quarter of the team's time, and we can't do anything else, and we can feel really proud of this, and we could release it, and it could just hit a massive wall. And it's hard, as logical and as unemotional and unattached as I tried to be, it's going to be devastating for all of us when we put that kind of effort and the world just doesn't care. It's like a little blip on the radar and it's gone. So I like to sit there and think, okay, these whiteboards that we produce, it's basically a couple hours of brainstorming with the team. I go away and within 1 hour, not 1 hour, 1 day, I can make the whiteboard. We record it and it goes live the next day. So we're talking about in total, maybe 2.5 days worth of work, and it can get 100,000 views. And that's where I like to put my energy versus like, let's spend weeks producing, coordinating, shooting and editing something that we just don't know if it's going to work or not.
So, I'm hearing that a lot of this is kind of, data driven. It's very driven on growth, which is one of your main goals. And I know that's to meet your larger goal, which is to teach 1 billion people, which I think is a really lofty, impressive goal. And I actually don't have any doubt that you'll probably hit it. Aside from like a bus or something coming in and hitting you first. But that being said, is there any pieces that you make or any videos you've done or some content that's just for you? I think there's a lot of artists. I feel like, you've kind of become more of a producer and more of a, someone that's trying to move things and your goal is paying for the team, making sure everyone's fed. You have all these sub goals, but a lot of artists out there, they're like, I don't really care about money. I don't really care about people that see it. I'm trying to make something for me. Is there anything you do to meet that, or does these meet that despite the fact that they have this higher goal of being paid and getting views?
Yeah. So look, each person has how they're going to measure their life. And I'm not sitting here telling you one way is better than the other. Whatever works for you, works for you. And I would argue that the people who work on art, and it's like, I don't really care if anybody sees it or appreciates it, it's not telling you the whole truth. And if that was the case, then you would never show your work ever to anyone, period. And you would just toil in anonymity for the rest of your life. And I think that's, like, if you want to be Van Gogh, be Van Gogh. I get it. Never sold a painting in his life, right? Cut off his ear. He's tragic, There's a lot of issues with that. Like, my whole mission is to try and help people who are creative live a life of creativity and make it sustainable by making money on the things that they love, therefore allowing them to do more of what they love. And I think the world would be a better place if we were able to do that. So that's my goal. That's my intention. So I don't want to make something just for me that moves me away from my goal. My goal is to get people to achieve and realize their own dreams and to feel empowered and to have the tools and techniques that they need to continue doing what it is they do. And that resonates with me. But I'll say this. I go on lives, I do podcasts and with people that have relatively small audiences where I know the reach and the scope is going to be small. And so I could argue and say, like, that's just for me then, because I'm happy to talk to people. Like you said, the small people.
That's really interesting. I think in some ways, because your goal, and you're so in tune with your goal in a lot of ways, and it's broad enough to give you a lot of diversity in action, but also narrow enough to give you, what's not in scope. In some ways, everything you make is kind of in your goal, right? Long as you're educating people. And I have a similar goal of teaching artists. Mine's more enabling. I want to create a template business that other artists can recreate and use to kind of gain the freedom. I recently discovered there's a book called Business of One, which is essentially what I run. And it's like, read that book and you know all my philosophies. And that's how I feel reading. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I believe. That mixed with Blair Enns' Win Without Pitching manifesto are kind of what I'm creating here. And so I guess one of the questions, and this gets kind of back to the theme, is, why are so many artists, they're so creative with their work and they can think outside of the box when it comes to, someone gives them a brief and it seems limited and they're able to break it out. Why don't they do that same aspect when it comes to monetizing their career? Where you have more opportunities than ever now. And yet so many people, I think, are seeking that 9 to 5. And you have a lot of people that work for you, that I know you've challenged and it kind of pushed to out of their comfort zones, but they're still like, no, I just want to work for you, Chris. I just want to do 9 to 5, and then I can relax and do whatever I want on the weekend. And not even that you have to work extra, but like, why is it so limited that it has to be a day job and I need an employer to validate me as an artist?
I think there's a lot of factors leading to that. I can't pretend to know what drives and motivates each person, what's inside their heart and soul. But I think our society has trained us to want and to desire a job, a job, where you show up to, there's stability, you have health insurance, and there's a 401k plan. And when you hit 65, you retire. I get that. But there's so many new opportunities that exist for anyone, even a person who's not a self-described creative person, to do something and to reap the rewards for it. Like, you should work harder on your personal development than you do on your own job. It helps you, have options later on, but it actually helps you to perform better in your job in the first place. And that's why I push my team so hard. Now, I know it seems kind of strange. I'm a person who's teaching people how to go out and become an independent business owner. And yet I have employees. So if all my employees did that, well, who would work for me? And so we're trying to find this sweet spot where everybody that is in my employment today, at some point, they graduate from that. And I think that would be a wonderful thing. Like, you go work for me 3 to 5 years, whatever the amount of time is, give or take. And then at some point you say to yourself, I've learned as much as I can. I'm prepared to go out into the world. I'm going to go do my own thing. And I think that's fine. I think that's a sign of a healthy, growing company where the people are moving up. And that's what they should be doing, right? And so then if I'm able to do this, then new people come in, and then there's a constant refreshing of who's in and who's out. Let's take, for example, Matthew and Zena. He's been a long-time contributor to the 2 companies that I've run, first as Blind and then as The Future. He's been with me over 10 years, and it started out as literally a student-teacher relationship in school, and now he's going to go do his own thing. And I've just been wondering in my mind, when is Matthew going to leave? So when he reached out to me, he said, I need to talk to you. I'm like, I kind of know what you're going to talk to me about. Of course, I don't want that to happen, but I'm prepared for it to happen. And so when he says it, it's not a shock to my system at all. I want the best for Matthew, and Matthew needs to do his own thing, and he's more than ready to do it. He's been ready for years, but I've been grateful for the number of years he's served us.
This is really encouraging to hear, because I love Matthew, and whenever I've been out, we've had some small conversations, and it's been wonderful to get to know him, and mostly his opinions on coffee and how seriously he takes it. But that's a rare quality to have, I think, as a business owner. I know so many people that view leaving the company as betrayal, and I've left companies before where afterwards they've just told everyone, to my face, they're like, oh no, whatever you need to do, we totally understand. And then they turn around and go like, he was a bad seed, he had all this problem. So it really shows a lot of maturity there. And that kind of leads me into sort of our first spicier question, which is, you have 1 million followers on YouTube, right? And you have a team that works for you. How do you stay so humble and grounded? It's really been really interesting. I think it makes you stand out among a lot of people that have this. You don't spend all of your time flexing. You spend very little time telling everybody how great you are. You kind of let the work speak for itself. And then when somebody goes and says, hey, I'm done, I'm gonna move on, you don't take personal insult at it. That's a rare person. What gives you kind of that ability to kind of stay so level?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, Alec, I want to just circle back to one thing, because people have been sending me messages about, oh my God, Matthew's leaving. Are you like, what's going on? The world's turning upside down.
Right. Isn't that weird? Like, people are very,
yes. They're sending me all these kinds of messages. And here's how I want them to think about this. I don't see Matthew in a business relationship as my spouse. It's like, we're not getting divorced. If anything, he's my brother or he's my son. And I want my brother or my son to have their own lives beyond me. Like, I still exist while they're apart from me. And people need to understand that. And this idea, and I've had this exact same reaction that you speak of, Alec, where as soon as you leave the company, it is a betrayal and you've breached some level of trust, because the first thing they think about is Alec is going to go out and get work from my client. And I say this all the time. They're not your clients if they are going to go somewhere else. They're only your clients by definition because they choose to stay with you. Not out of convenience, but because they elect to do that. And so a lot of business owners, especially in the creative space, super insecure people, they have that scarcity mindset, that lack mindset. And so when something like this happens, it's almost like you are personally insulting them right then and there. Like, you're not good enough. I'm going to take your clients and see you later, old man or old woman. I'm out of here. And then they badmouth you. They besmirch your reputation because they're trying to poison the well. So let's get adult about this, everyone. You know, when you don't want an employee to work for you, you fire them, and you don't sit there and you worry about them. So it has to work both ways. When it's no longer working for them, they also need to be able to go somewhere else, and you should do everything you can to help them. I think that's my take on that, and I'll end it there unless you want to do a follow-up, and then I can answer your other question.
No, that's very true. I think there's a lot of people that are very, very insecure, and I have the same idea. I mean, you said, they're not my spouse, but like, even my spouse, like, I shouldn't be getting jealous or mad of their success, or if they want to do, their own thing. You should only want the best for them. And I find so many people, there's somebody that asked a question in the pro group one time, and they're like, how do I stop my employees from moonlighting? And I was like, that's the wrong question. The question should be, why do they want to moonlight? Why do they feel they need to work outside of work? Like, because then that will give you solutions. You could be like, am I not paying them enough? If they need more money, then you need to pay them more. Then they'll stop moonlighting. Are they not getting enough responsibility? Then give them more responsibility in a project, and then they'll stop, moonlighting. And maybe they want to learn a new skill. In that case, you should be encouraging them to moonlight, because that will bring more value to you. And then it's not a problem. But I think people are so worried that, and maybe it's past experiences. Obviously there's all sorts of stuff in everyone's lives where someone betrays you, and it takes like, I think it's a 7-to-1 ratio, right? You have to have 7 good things happen to offset one bad thing. Otherwise, it's like, oh, I had a bad day because one bad thing happened despite a numerous good things happening. And that kind of gets exponential. If you have 3 bad things happen, then you have to have, what is that, 21 good things happen before, you start feeling like you had a good day. And I think this last year, there's always one bad thing every single day that's happened to everybody, right? There's this constant one bad thing that's happened that leads you to constantly think like, I'm having a bad day, and to be able to keep that perspective is really hard. But I think you're right to circle back around. I think it's, really important to want the best for people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But how do you keep that? Like, where does that come from? Like, what's the deeper thing? It's like, yeah, you have this ability and you want it, but like, I don't think you're super religious. I think you might be spiritual, but not religious. So what is the base that this is kind of built off of? It's a rare base.
I think it starts from a place of just joy and happiness first. Like, are you happy with yourself? Do you love yourself? Do you take good care of yourself in every aspect, like what you put in your body, how you expend energy, and the energy that you put out into the world? The funny thing is, when I talk to people, even on Zoom or more so in real life, they're like, you have this aura or this energy about you. And I don't believe in any of that stuff. I'm like, aura? What? Is it just because I'm happy and I'm not trying to prove to you that I'm good or I'm worthy or I'm important? I just want to sit here and kind of just be joyful. And that leads me to then a generous mindset. Like, I'm here for you. I don't care about whatever else is happening. I'm not thinking about being somewhere else. I'm not thinking about what I'm having for dinner. I'm just here, grounded in the moment, present to what's happening. And I guess for a lot of people, that's kind of rare because we're so used to people trying to prove themselves, to sell themselves, to pitch and persuade and to manipulate you into thinking something, that when somebody doesn't want that from you, it's like a shock to our system. It doesn't need to be like that. And so that's where I'm coming from. Like, I think I've already had enough experience in work that I don't have to prove that I am good at my work. I've received enough accolades. I've made enough money. So there's nothing left for me to try to prove to somebody. I don't need to go out and buy a fancy car just to prove to you that I'm a successful person. I'll buy the car because I like it, because it's like a beautiful piece of sculpture, but I'm not there trying to to flex, as the kids say these days. It's not, there's no point. And we find that when people do, when they throw it in your face, and we see this on Clubhouse all the time, people talking about their 7, 8, 9-figure business, doing X, Y, and Z, they just can't stop talking about themselves, that the signal that we get is the inverse of what they're thinking. Only the young, naive people out there see that and say, oh, I want a piece of that. That's who I want to be. You know, he's wearing that 3-piece Armani suit that's $3,000. It's all fake. It's really fake. And there's some beef going on between these ultra high net worth individuals where they say, you know, if I fly on a private jet, this is my life. I don't need to be shoving it into your face. And the people who do, you should be a little careful about those people.
No, that's a really good point. I guess the natural question for me would be, you know, were you always this way, or was there a point? Like for me, I'm like, did you go to school? Like, if you went to school, of course, like you want to flex on everybody. You have all these people that judged you for so long, and especially someone like me who was the nerd and who was the outcast, you got this chip on your shoulder, and it's like, I'm going to graduate. And I want to prove all these people wrong, and I want to flex a little bit. I want to show on all these people. So, you know, you're a little older than I am, you know, 2 or 3 years. But like, when did that happen? You know, I've obviously it's slowly, but is there a few places you can look back on your life and go, okay, that's where I cared a lot, and that's where I learned to stop caring so much.
Yeah, the conversation about to get real right now, because you're saying, yo, weren't you punked in school? Like, most definitely I was punked, and I definitely had some issues going to school. You know, the whole junior high to high school process is about establishing yourself in an alpha group, being part of the top of the pecking order, so that, you know, with that expression where crap rolls downhill. I was downhill, and I was catching a lot of crap for a lot of different reasons. I'm smaller than most boys my age back then. I'm unathletic. I'm into video games and comic books, playing Dungeons and Dragons. Not exactly like hotshot material here, where Biff is wearing the Letterman jacket, captain of the XYZ team, and all the girls are swooning for them. I'm like, God, how do I get a piece of that? Like, how do I become in that space? And so for a long time, you're just trying to prove yourself, to fit in. And it did not end after I graduated high school. I was still in that thing. Like, I'm this weird Asian guy, and like, this is not my country. I wasn't born here. This is not my native language. I'm always feeling the outsider. Things started to change when I got into design school, when I started to study graphic design, and I started to learn something. So now I can anchor my self-worth and my identity around something, a skill, something that nobody can take away from you, right? So I learned about typography, and it feels like I was given some kind of a skeleton key that would open all locks to design. And then from there, you find out like, okay, I'm okay now. I found something. And even though I look like a mess, and I'm still poor, you know, relative to the people who go to private art school, but then I started to find ways to like, okay, you know, based on this, I have an equalizer, and the equalizer is my skill and my self-belief.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful thing, I think, is to come into the realization of, is realizing that, you know, you have a skill set, you have ability that, you know, that it's almost the thing that other people don't have, right? It's like, okay, well, I don't have the Letterman jacket, right? I'm not on the football team. I don't have the hot cheerleader girlfriend. I don't have whatever it is that people find the status of. And you find the one thing that you do have. And what's really cool about finding that in your art in some ways, or an ability that you have, is nobody can really take that away from you. You know, and when people have the cars, or the suits, or the, you know, whatever else, it tends to be really easy, I think, to be insecure, because those things are insecure. You know, if your job or your position is where you're finding your self-worth. But you know, you're talking about finding it in something that's innate, right? It's your skill, your eye, you know, your the way you look at the world is what you value about yourself. And so that's something that's very difficult to take away from somebody. I think it's one of the reasons why, you know, religion is so powerful in a lot of ways. I think, you know, you have something that, even if you're completely broke, and even if you have, you know, you're on the bottom of the pecking order, you know, it's something you can hold on to, as no one can take this from me, and it's something I have. I want to drive a little bit into this, because this is the one thing that someone that's been a little creepy, and how much I watch your material, and how much I've followed. I've heard a lot of these sort of stories you're talking about, but And I know that, you're, I believe, Vietnamese immigrant family, and your dad worked his butt off, and your mom made sure that you earned whatever it was you're going to get. But I don't know much about, your view on religion and spirituality. And if you're not comfortable talking about it, we don't have to talk about it. And I would like to avoid politics, obviously, but it's something I'm really curious about, because I think it's fundamental to a lot of people, and them being able to figure this out, I think, is an important step in their lives.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Let's see where this conversation goes. But I was raised Catholic from a super religious, like Catholic family, where my grandmother would call us all the time the old Catholic guilt. And she would say, "Did you guys go to church? I didn't see you at church." And you're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, Grandma, I'm gonna go." And we went religiously. And when we first moved from Kansas City, Missouri to San Jose, I went before my parents left. They had stuff to deal with, the house to sort out, and where we're gonna live. So I lived with my grandmother and my many uncles and aunts in this, 2-story house, but we were packed in there to the gills. And every night, my grandmother was like, "We're gonna pray," and we would pray for an hour, doing Hail Marys and just everything, just over and over again. And then my uncle would just test me all the time, like, "Have you memorized this?" And it was tough. And that's the kind of environment I grew up in. Now, as I got a little older, in high school, I started to explore other religions, because I had lots of questions, like, what's the meaning of life? Who created us, or whatever? So I explored being a Jehovah's Witness. My girlfriend, or the girl I was interested in, she was a Jehovah's Witness, so I explored that. When I got into Art Center, I started to explore the Christian groups, and I'd ask them lots of questions. And unfortunately, I never got really great answers. And sadly, too, I found some of the thinking to be quite hypocritical. And it started to sour on me. It's like, if you're not part of this gang, then you're not part of us. And I think, is the Hindi person thinking that? Is the Buddhist thinking that? Is the Taoist thinking these things? Like, a lot of us inherit religion from our parents, right? So it's like, that wasn't even your decision. It wasn't like you were exposed to 18 of the world's religions and then you chose the right one for you, so that whatever true God would say, given all the options, you chose me. And that's important to me. And I also found, like, from the Old Testament and all that stuff, like, God seems to be a very vindictive person. I just don't see that. And there's something funky around here. So that's when I start to back away from religion and say that maybe I'm a spiritual person, maybe I'm not. My worldview is everybody is allowed to believe in whatever they believe in. And if it helps you, makes you stronger, doesn't hurt other people, so be it, do that. So I've kind of stepped away from organized religion myself many years ago. So I say I'm a recovering Catholic or something like that.
Yeah, it's not an uncommon story for me. I think what I find a little more rare, though, is the way you approach things seems to still have a lot of the values that I find in religion, and that's what's really interesting. Like, you believe in every relationship is very personal, and I think you think there's a lot of value in each individual, and there's a lot of these things that you've been able to maintain that I don't often see from people that step away from religion and kind of take on a more there's a word I'm looking for, but I can't quite find it. But like a relativistic standpoint, right? Where it's like, we're all material, we're all just kind of dirt, like, who cares? And you don't have that laissez-faire attitude. You don't have this attitude of, well, we're all going to die, so what's the point in educating a billion people if in the end they're just all become nothing? What motivates that? What is it? Why do you feel so strongly about educating a billion people? That's a lot of people to educate. And that's a big task, but and it's not like you have a higher calling, right? It's like, it's the calling coming from you. So what's motivating that? And it's kind of funny because you're wearing the God as a designer hat right now.
There's some irony.
It's ironic, but
yeah. Okay, so I'd like to speak to that. So here's the thing. What people sometimes don't understand about me is that my family and we escaped communist Vietnam. Like, when there was the Civil War, there's a winner and there's a loser. We're on the loser side. So we had a very small window to escape, get out of the country. It's like April 30th, 1975, something like that. My parents flee, and they could have landed in many different places. Some people went to Canada, some people went to Australia. Wherever somebody would accept you, you would go. And since there was a large United States presence in Vietnam trying to help us win the war, naturally we went to the United States. And so here we have to start our life all over. My dad has lost everything, language, skills, everything. It's all gone. Just the people were able, his family, his brothers and sisters, and my mom's brothers and sisters. That's all we had.
If you,
So
you don't
we
mind me asking, what was your dad before leaving? Just so people have an idea of what all you gave up. What was he doing? What was your life kind of look like a little bit? I know you were probably very young.
Yeah, so my dad was in the military, and my mom was like a secretary at the embassy for the U.S. And so for him to stay in the country would have been a disaster because they don't treat enemy combatants. Yeah, it was going to be really bad. And there's horrible stories about how people were re-educated, whatever. And so my dad was like, we have to leave, and he did everything in his power to get us out of the country because all the plans that the U.S. government had set up had failed. And so it came down to just being quick on your feet, and thank God we got out, right? So we landed in America. This is a new home for us. We're trying to figure out a way out, and we're in the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, right? Just trying to sort things out. And through hard work, persistence, and just a lot of sacrifice, my dad's first job was working as a busboy clearing tables to becoming an engineer at a semiconductor company at the end of his career, kind of holding a pretty high position. And so I think, wow, what a wonderful country and culture and society that we live in, that a refugee that has no right to be here can go all the way to the top of wherever they want to be. And so then my dad gives me that gift. And that gift is opportunity and freedom to choose. And so I take that gift. I study design. And I said earlier, I became successful at doing something that, by all accounts, maybe I shouldn't have even been successful, but here I am anyways. And, just to put it into perspective, a few years out from school, my wife and I are able to buy our first house together. The reason why we're able to do that was two things. I need to point this out. We bought a $500,000 home just a few years out of school. Was one, because my wife's parents gave us a down payment of $100,000. If we didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to do that. But two, I had a thriving business or about to be thriving business that can support the mortgage payments for this. And I'm 3 years out of school, and I reflect back on my mom and dad's life. Like, how long did it take them to be able to buy their first starter home? And it was not instantaneous. And so they kept trading up. And now I feel like this country has given so much to me. The least that I can do is to give back, to pay it forward, to send the elevator back down. Because there are other people who need that same help, who don't have the access and weren't as fortunate as I am. Like, we landed in the best, like Gary Vaynerchuk, the best zip code, America. So there are people that watch our show in all parts of the world, in developing countries, where you think, do you guys have electricity and internet? Like, how's this possible? And so some kids from the Philippines will go to the library and download the videos and then go back home and watch them because the internet is not so stable there, right? The infrastructure isn't there. And so that's all I want to do at this point. And I'm not telling you I'm a socialist or a communist. We escaped that, right? But I believe in trying to return some of that back, do some public good. And I also believe that the more good that you do, the more good that comes back to you. Not necessarily on a one-to-one transactional basis, but we have a whole bunch of people who volunteer just to pay us money so that we can continue to make content. We have people who just send me money on Venmo just to say thank you. And I think that's amazing. That's proof in this spirit of generosity.
No, I think that's really, really powerful. My life philosophy is somewhat, I haven't quite perfected it, but it's something like, nobody owes you anything and you owe everyone everything. It's like that. And it's essentially playing
I
into
like
what you
that.
said. Like, in order to have anything I have, I owe Edison for, and Tesla for all the lights and everything I have. And I owe everyone that developed my computers. I'm getting an unfair advantage based on the past, right? I owe the Wright brothers, right? Or whatever it is for the airplanes. Like, I owe so many people. I owe the doctor that gave me, and most of my life I've been taking, right? Like, I didn't pay for my own education. I didn't pay for those teachers for the time. And, my parents paid for it, and, I owe them, and I owe, so many, but the way you pay it back is not by, going backwards and paying all these dead people that don't exist anymore, slash, or your living parents. You pay it by they want you. And if you ask them, most parents, not all, but most would say, I want you to go have kids, and I want you to start a job, or I want you to start something that helps other people down the line. So you're paying it forward essentially, based on what you've been given. And then the idea of no one owing you anything means you don't get to claim that from anyone else. So I don't get to walk up to Chris and say, Chris, you have to pay me because I know you owe the world this debt. And it's like, why owe the world? I don't owe you specifically. So that's kind of how those two aspects work out as far as my kind of philosophy goes. It's the simplest way I can put it. It's more complicated.
I like it.
I think it works as a saying. Maybe one day I'll have it on the hat,
Yeah.
But so it's really interesting to me because you've had a lot of success, and you have a lot of fans and people like me that pay monthly to, or not anymore. You've been very generous with me as someone that helps out a little bit. How do you, I guess the question is like, do you see? I'm trying to figure out how to ask this, because I can ask it in a very controversial way or less controversial way. Something that often happens when you have a lot of influence is you get a lot of people that are trying to do the same thing. I think we've seen this. You could call it either. You could look at it positively and say like there's a bunch of little mini Chris's out there trying to do strategy and teach people and whatnot. It only because it rolls off the tongue. I've jokingly called it the cult of Chris now and then. That I'm a part of. I do strategy as well as part of my business. How do you feel about that? And is that something that you are fine with? You hope people kind of spin off to do more unique things? How do you feel about kind of the mini Chris's popping up all over the place?
Yeah, I had a similar conversation with Melinda about this, where she's like, you're always manipulating me, aren't you? And I said, well, when you say manipulation, is there a negative or positive connotation with that? And she goes, negative. Okay, so you're saying I'm manipulating you. So let's examine this for a little bit. So when you go to see a chiropractor, what are they doing? And how do they describe what they're doing? They're manipulating your body. For what purpose? To help you realign, and so that your muscles can heal and so you don't have pain anymore. So we don't look at that as bad. She's like, no. I said, but then if we say like there's a marionette with the strings and somebody's pulling the strings and you have no free will and they're pushing you to do something they have an ulterior motive, that's not good then, right? She goes, yeah, for sure, that's not good. So I say like, where does this word manipulation come from then? Because if I'm your coach, your teacher, or your mentor, I'm trying to get you to solve your problem. I'm trying to help you improve your status. Whatever it is I'm trying to do, it is in service to you. So if you go and see a tennis coach, a judo coach, or a writing coach, they are manipulating you too. They're trying to give you tools and tricks and techniques so that you can overcome some kind of obstacle. Like turn your wrist this way, step into the swing, and flip your wrist. All those kinds of things are to manipulate you to play better. But if we throw out that word very casually and we're not very careful in our intention, then we start to say that, well, while you're teaching me, I don't like that you're removing my freedom. And so what people do as students, they become really poor students at that point. And I think, and this is going to be a broad statement here, so I'm going to get some flack for it, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think in America, we have this very independent spirit. Like, you can't tell me I can't have this gun or preach this way or drive this truck. I get to do whatever it is I want. And I think that's great. And then we go to a teacher, or the teacher could be a book. Like you can pick up a book. And if you're saying like, I'm going to read this book because I want to learn something, your intention going in is to be changed, to be transformed. So you have to have an open mind. If you read a book that already aligns with what it is that you think, why read the book? That's called confirmation bias, because you just want more information to tell you you're on the right path. And to a degree, some of us need that, and that's good. But hopefully, what you do is you expose yourself to new ideas, new ways of thinking, so that you can grow. It's that growth that's really important to me. So when you approach someone, I think if you want to get the maximum from that experience, you should approach it like, clear your mind, cleanse the palate, let's do some mental flossing, let's open ourselves up to what this is, try it out a couple of times before we go away and say, yeah, that's not going to work. And the opposite happens. People go in guarded, like, who the hell are you? Why would this work? What proof do you have? What guarantees do you have that this will work for me? And so very few people can actually pass those tests. So you just wasted a lot of your time. So I say save your money, save your time. Don't read a book that you have no intention of learning from. Don't watch a video if you don't want to learn from it. And don't go to a class that you think this is the worst use of your time. Just don't do it.
Yeah, I think I agree with most of that stuff. I have two kind of things that I think I might have noticed with some people. There's some people I think that, you are what you eat, right? And if you are, around you a lot and listening to a lot of what you're putting out there, I think there's this unconsciousness of slowly emulating, right? You emulate your parents and you take on all their personality traits. And, if you spend, hours a day around Chris, you emulate Chris. And it's one of those things that like sort of happens to people. And I think it's in the book Mastery. He talks about this, how like really good students, if you're a really great student, you should be able to get to that point where like you can do everything they can do verbatim. But then there's this moment where you need to graduate past that and you need to figure out your own voice, and you see this with so many great artists of the past that have one of these mentor figures. That's really great. Whether it's Aristotle and Plato, and whether it's, others, it's like, okay, you took on all this stuff. You can say everything you know what they're going to say before they say it, and now you need to kind of move on, and graduate and figure out, what's your voice now, and where is that at. The same relationship you should have with your parents. Like if you never move out, and you never grow up, you're essentially, you kind of, there's something wrong with that in our physiology. We can kind of detect like, you should be graduating now. So I think there's some of that going on. Do you think that occasionally happens, where people get so comfortable with, being in this place where they can continually learn, as well as, have this, like, I can emulate Chris and it works, that they haven't figured out what their own voice is yet?
There's a couple levels to this. I think about this a lot. So because somebody's heard me say something, because they can parrot back what is being said, does not mean that they know how to apply it. And there's a big difference there. There's a big difference between saying something and having lived it, right? So I can tell you, here's how you do value-based pricing. If I haven't done it, okay, academically, I know what I'm talking about, sure. But then when you push a little bit deeper, it's like it starts to fall apart. And that's usually where people get this stuff wrong. So yes, you're right. We learn through emulation, period. That's how you should learn. You copy. And when you copy, now you got to go and apply it. Where we get into problems is the person's never applied it, and then they go on to teach someone else this thing. And so it becomes like the mirror thing, like when two mirrors reflect each other, each copy gets darker, dimmer, and less or lower fidelity. And that's the problem. And I think that's what people are reacting to. It's like, have you done strategy before? And what insights have you gained from that? Or have you actually negotiated a deal where you had to overcome some serious obstacles? And so this is the trap that a lot of people fall into. Now, I'm not here to judge them, because who am I to judge anyone? But then sometimes it's like that expression goes, like when the tide goes out, you see who's not wearing pants, right? And that's where it becomes problematic, because it only takes one thing to challenge you and then you start to fall apart.
That makes a lot of sense. I think you just summed up our entire like previous 3-hour discussion better than I did when I was trying to make that sort of a point very poorly. No, I think that's a really good way to look at it, is that there's a lot of people that have heard this and see that it works and want to preach it in some ways, but they haven't mastered it themselves yet as in practice.
I was watching the Billie Eilish documentary on Apple Plus, and I just want to share something with you. It's quite interesting. So the two parents are very musical. They teach both their son and daughter music and play piano, ukulele, and sing and all this kind of stuff. And so Phineas is like composing the music, and the dad walks in and he's like, that sounds like this other song. And he was just making an innocent comment. And then Phineas snaps back at him. He says, it's always the people who've never written a song that want to compare your song to some other song. And I was like, whoa, dude, easy there. That's your dad. Your dad, there's like a little respect here, brother. He's just saying something innocent. And I think Phineas is coming from a very vulnerable place. And as an artist and a creator, I could totally feel what he was feeling. But in that moment, as an objective observer, I was like, yo, that's your dad, man. Your dad only wants the best for you. And if you don't agree with what he's saying, just smile. You don't have to snap back like that. Okay? And so when we get into this whole world and we say like, oh, there's this cult and people are saying these things and they're doing these things, I think in some ways they're also snapping back. They're reflecting something that they've never actually applied. And it's really important, in my opinion, if you're asking me for my opinion, that, learn some things and then go do it. We don't want theoretical academic book knowledge. We want you to go do it. And then make sure you do it well enough that you can be confident enough to say, okay, I've done it enough times. Let me open up my own martial arts school. It's like you got to be in a couple of tournaments. You got to get into a street fight or two before you say, I could teach you how to fight. You've not been in one.
No, and that's that quote that everybody, including myself, really loves, which is Mike Tyson's, like, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? Like, you can have all the theory and you can have all this, but if you've never done it, it's really easy to fall apart. And I think that's where a lot of time that's who shows and reveals a lot of these people, I think, is sometimes you have somebody that's only been a theoretical, whatever it is, theoretical business owner, a theoretical, strategy consultant. And then you have someone that's actually done it. And then you put them side by side. And that's usually, I think, where someone falls apart often. And because they don't have that practical knowledge of the subject. Yeah, because I find myself in a place where I think, and I'm gonna, I don't know if it needs to be announced or anything, but I think I'm gonna take a little step back from the pro group for a little bit to try to figure out how to do it more. And this is one step in that is recording this. And I think I told like Mo, I'm like, I think I'm where you were at like 6 months ago, where he took a month off and took some time to actually practice some of this stuff. And so I think that's what I'm kind of feeling, that same itch where, and it's been slow. And I know everyone has their own speed. And I know that in the past, you've probably been a little more, I don't know how to put it, like, you've been encouraging people to act faster. And it takes us so long before we actually do any actions. And, for me, what I've been trying to reverse engineer it and figure out, like, why am I so resistant? And why am I, especially older, I think some of it's risk, when you're younger, it's easier. And I was someone that very quickly, I would just like do something. I just traveled to another country on a whim. I would, whatever it was, I just quit. I just walked in one day and was like, I'm out. I don't like this anymore. So I'm trying to get some of that back. And for you, is that something that you've gotten more used to, that it just takes some people really long time, or you just still feel like, man, I just wish you'd just get up and do something already?
No, I still wish that, because there's a lot of energy that's expended in trying to get something to move, the whole inertia thing. I think Mo, having worked with me for over 2 years now, he had a breakthrough a couple of Sundays ago. He and I talk on a pretty regular basis, and he did this thing again, because I said, Mo, this is what you should do. And he goes, well, tell me like when I haven't done that before. I said, okay, Mo, it's a dangerous question that you're asking me, and I can tell you the answer to this. Are you sure you want to know? And he's like, no, I don't need to know. I said, okay, that's the first sign that you're ready to get to start, because otherwise you're just looking for more reasons. And there's just no amount of time that can fill up all the reason bucket so that you can move on. And I said, because you said that, I think you've graduated from whatever level you were and you're moving to the next level. But I said, I'm going to tell you the answer to your question anyways, because you asked it. So you want me to point out something in the past where you've done this. So if I do a good job, you're going to feel really bad, because you're like, oh God, I'm such an idiot. I've done this so many times, and he has all the evidence collected. So answer number one, you're going to feel horrible. Answer number two, I'm going to say a bunch of things, and then you're going to say, no, that's not true. And you're going to fight it, and you're not going to change anyways. I don't know of a third answer. It's either you're going to agree and feel horrible, or you're going to disagree and make no change. None of those two options are good. So let's get out of your head and let's just get to work. And since that Sunday conversation, he's had some pretty remarkable breakthroughs. So it's just, yeah, each time somebody needs to get to that point, and you stare at the cliff, on the edge of the cliff, and you're like, can I take this step or not? And every time you turn around, you go back. And even though I tell you there's a piece of glass, you can step on there, it will be fine. You just won't take that step. What triggers each person, I do not know. But I know in my own life, the more I step to that cliff and just take that leap of faith, if you will, right? The more I grow. And so I want to stay in that state.
Yeah, it's been really weird for me because I'm the type of person that I love cliff diving. I used to do it all the time with my friends, and we just go out. There's a lot of great cliff diving locations out here in AZ and in California. And you'd always get people that just couldn't do it, right? They just would run up, they'd walk up. And sometimes the most dangerous people were the people that we had. One time we took a bunch of high school students out to go cliff diving. And, my little brothers were just running off and just leaping, just shooting off. And there's a couple of these big tough kids, football players and stuff like that. And they couldn't make themselves do it. And there's rocks at the bottom, but if you jump out there, you're not going to hit them at all, right? But only if you go straight down, which is almost impossible. So we're like, yeah, just jump, just get like 3 feet, you'll be fine. And this kid ran up to the edge, decided last minute not to go, and started sliding off to where it was. And I was like, dude, we're just yelling. I'm like, push. If you don't push off, you're gonna break a leg, maybe your head. And he finally pushed off, and it was fine. But there was a couple, slow motion as this kid sliding off this cliff, not committing. And I think that it's hard. I think so many of us don't realize, that it's like, that's almost worse in some ways to half commit, fail, and go, see, I told you so. See, I told you it doesn't work. I tried and I did what you said. I jumped off, but like, you didn't fully commit, and you didn't, there's all these other factors that we held on to.
Yeah, you self-sabotage is what happens.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something that's really hard to figure out what the reasoning and solution was. And if we could, I'm sure you could make $1 million. Here's how to cure, your inability to move.
Yeah. But here's what I think is happening. The internal narrative is this thing that you're saying cannot possibly be true, because then therefore, however many years that I believe this to be true, it's going to ruin me, right? So if you're hitting yourself against your head against the wall and saying like, why can't I make more than $50,000 a year? And you've been doing this for 40 years of your life, let's just say. And somebody says, if you change this one thing, if you just change the way you say this word versus that word, everything's going to open up for you. And you fight it and you fight it and you fight it because you say to yourself, it can't be that simple. There's no way I can be this dumb and that no one will believe this. And then one day you actually say it and your life transforms. And it's like, now you have to accept the fact that you've had a wrong opinion for a very long time. And that hurts people on a deep psychological, spiritual level. That's why they can't stay. They can't step away from that position. So they continue to hold on to it.
Well, and we're more loss averse than we are, pro gaining something. And it's 100%. I believe it's in Never Split the Difference where he talks about this. If you can make it seem like they're losing something, then they're far more likely to negotiate against themselves. And I think that's what happens, is we negotiate against ourselves in this situation where it's like, well, that means, it's this, it's the sunk cost fallacy. That is, I think it's one of the strongest things, to be honest, in our personalities that we have is, not wanting to pivot, not wanting to accept that I just not even wasted, right? I think that's the wrong way to look at it. It's like, okay, I tried that for this many years and it's okay. It's okay that I move on and that's not the way it is. But we really don't want to experience that pain of knowing that, like you said. And I think that's the worst part for me is I think, let's say Mo did take the denial route. Deep down, you actually know, right? Deep down, really, you're sitting there going like, yeah, he's right. But like,
it's pretty deep down there.
You're going to lie to yourself over and over again. And then you're going to lash out at other people and they're going to be like, where is this coming from? And it's like, well, because deep down, I know that this thing isn't right. It's one of those things that's been really, I think, difficult for, I think, a lot of artists. And I think a lot of people are going to resonate with it. Okay. We'll wrap it up. I think we've had a really good conversation. I could go for obviously like 3 or 4 hours every time. And I love talking with you. And that's, it's one of the highlights of my year every year is whenever we get to have a good long conversation, and hopefully, get some value. Is there anything that you wanted to say or you've been wanting to say to people that they haven't heard yet?
No, I don't know. I always say this to people when I'm on a show or a panel discussion. I try to live as transparently as possible. So if there's a question that you want to have answered, I have done the best that I can to answer in the moment in the limited capacity I have, right? And I do that, and I try to do that as much as possible. So I don't feel like there's some hidden thing that I'm like, man, I was just wishing somebody would ask me this, because I would have just told them at that point. Like I told you a story about Phineas because I had a reaction to it. I didn't even know if it makes sense within the context of what we're talking about, but I just feel like I had to say that. So I don't think so. But, as someone who's probably watched almost all of our videos on YouTube and inside the pro group and have been a part of many of my live discussions that aren't recorded, is there something you feel like, dang it, why won't he answer this question? Or I got something, and not a gotcha thing, but just like, hey man, why haven't you talked about this before?
Yeah, there's one thing, and I want to be
Okay.
respectful of your time because it could get a little
Right.
messy. Um, but there's one thing that I'm keenly aware of, and that's the kind of the cancel culture that we live in. And I know there's a lot of discussion around it, and I don't want to necessarily tread new old ground, but I think there's a large group of artists that are using that, me included, as kind of an excuse of like, if I be honest and transparent, if I put myself out there, knowing for a fact that I have some unpopular opinions, right? And it's a real thing. You see Gina Carano from The Mandalorian get canceled. You're like, well, I don't think she's crazy, right? Like I might think that her opinion or her take was in ill taste. I might have think it was not great, but a lot of people have I've had bad takes many times in my life, and while I don't have her reputation, I don't have the protection, that someone like that has. So I guess, what would you say to artists that are worried about that are silent, that are self, censoring due to the fact they're worried about they're going to slip up? For me, I'm having these long form conversations and I'm trying to be honest as possible. I'm like, I have a gun on my hat and I'm like, is someone going to cancel me because I don't know. We live in a very hard world in that way, and it's something I'm trying to just be like, well, let's see. Like, what's the worst that can happen? They cancel me, and I end up where I was before. You know?
Yeah. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about this. So I'm going to preface what I'm going to say is relatively new and forming in terms of my thoughts on this. If you're not in a place where you can afford to have doors closed for you, I would say just be more mindful of what it is that you say. And we should all be more mindful, right? Because the words that we say can actually hurt people. And I love that we're in this place now where companies, people, corporations have to be responsible for the decisions that they make. Now, that can go too far where the slightest little pushback makes a company crumble. And I'm not for that either.
Being able to vote for your wallet seems really good. In other ways, whoever has the biggest wallet kind of gets to dictate what happens. And in that sense, I'm a little worried, when it comes to outside forces. And it's something that I know you said you're still forming your opinion on it. So it's something I'm keenly aware of while trying not to let it affect what I'm doing so much. But I get the sense, and the more I talk to people behind closed doors, and if I talk to somebody in a non on the record thing, it's something they're very worried about. It's something a lot of artists, great artists that I've loved for a really long time, have said, I haven't been able to make anything for a while because I'm worried that my view on this is not going to be popular, and then I'm going to get this hate. And it's something we already deal with as artists, and it seems to compound when not only can they tell you they don't like it, but also take away something that you really love, like working on Star Wars or something.
Yeah, I think art is a reflection of society and culture, and sometimes can shape culture. And a lot of times it's really, really critical. You're an anti this person, anti that person. Well, speak up. Let your voice be heard. Otherwise, you're suppressing your own thing. But just to realize it's not an act of courage if there's no consequence to it, and you want to make courageous art. So go do your thing. I see people doing things with Trump, with Hillary Clinton and Bernie, and not all of it's flattering. It's actually pretty horrific. And depending on who you are, so he's an equal opportunity offender. So he's going to say, screw you and screw you and screw all of you because you're all a bunch of twats or whatever he's going to say. That's fine. And apparently it's not hurt him at all. And so he's put himself in a position where he doesn't care. And he can afford not to care, because I already talked to him about this long before he made any of that kind of artwork. He's like, I've been really smart. I don't spend a lot of money, and I invest my money wisely, and I'm going to be okay. So I think there's a couple things that we can do. Get yourself in a position where expressing your point of view is not going to ruin your life, so that you can share whatever it is that you think. And if you think, for every person who likes vanilla, there's another person who likes chocolate. So you don't have to be for everyone. Just be for the people who likes chocolate. Totally okay. And part two of this is, if you don't like something, go change it. Sitting around complaining about it and you're like, I don't like it. Create your own media company. Create your own social platform. Do what you got to do, solve the problem. But expecting others to live the way you want to live and make the decisions you want to make, that's a whole nother thing. If you don't want to support any of these companies, don't buy their products. Don't give them money so that they can continue to do it. And that works for whether you're left, right, or center. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to end this. I think that's the cure in my mind, is you have to be able to go and act. And if there's no risk, everyone would be doing it, right? If there's no risk in investing in Tesla, if there's no risk in spending every day making every days for 10 years, you know, and I mean, if just like two things changed, right? If let's say Bitcoin was like outlawed and something else changed, people would not have, you know, the fame and notoriety he does today, as far as in the common, like on CNN and like in the layman's household, right? He would stay an artist, and it's one of those things that um, I think I'm finally there. I hope I can say this. You know, I'm going to be making what I feel like I need to make, and be putting my voice out there, um, and asking people kind of the tough questions is my goal, and trying to challenge artists on, you know, getting them to move and think more creatively about what they're doing, and um, that's the only thing I can do, you know, is put it out there and see what happens. And I just thank you for being willing to talk to me about it, and being willing to show up on my tiny little channel, and have an honest conversation. Thank you so much, Chris.
Happy to do it, Alec.